How many times have you been used by people who claim to love you? How many times have you swallowed your anger just to keep the peace?
You learn to be nice, but deep down you feel that no one respects you. People only come to you when they need something. You say yes to everything, but you live tired, frustrated, invisible. If you're the type who constantly tries to be a good person, stop now. Yes, you heard that right. Stop. Because this kindness of yours may be destroying your self-esteem, making you manipulable, and preventing you from earning the respect you deserve. Those who strive to be good in everything they do will be ruined among so many who are not good. In this video, I'm going to show you why the idea of being a good person, the way you were taught, is a psychological trap. We're going to dive into the brutal and liberating lessons of Niccolò Machiavelli, the thinker who shows you how to stop being used and start being respected. You'll understand how toxic kindness makes you and why trying to please everyone only weakens your identity, and how to apply Machiavellian virtue to achieve emotional autonomy, personal power, and true respect. If you're tired of being the nice person everyone ignores, this video can transform the way you see life and yourself. Subscribe now, activate the bell. Since childhood, we are conditioned to believe that being a good person means being submissive, overly gentle, someone who never argues, forgives everything, and is always willing to put others' needs above their own. This idea is reinforced by parents, teachers, religions, and even the media. The good one is the person who suffers in silence, accepts everything, and is eventually rewarded with love and recognition. But adult life doesn't work like a fairy tale. The real world doesn't reward the overly nice. In fact, it often devours them. What we call virtue in this context becomes a disguised trap, because being good without discernment, without awareness, without boundaries, turns you into someone vulnerable, predictable, and easily manipulated. The overly nice person is the one who never sets conditions, never questions, never confronts. And for that very reason, they are seen as weak, someone who accepts anything, and therefore can be exploited. This is where the uncomfortable truth that Machiavelli saw centuries ago begins. Conventional morality doesn't exist to protect you, but to control you. Machiavelli breaks away from the idea that virtue equals submission. For him, virtue is something completely different. It's the ability of an individual to act with firmness, strategic intelligence, and courage in the face of life's instability. Virtue is not passivity, it is action. It's not blind obedience, it's vision. It's not pleasing, it's conquering, building, taking a stand. The virtuous person in the Machiavellian view is not guided by a universal morality, but by the capacity to understand the game of life and to play it wisely. While traditional morality teaches that you must do good, hoping the universe or others will reward you, Machiavelli teaches the opposite. Expect nothing. No one will give you what you don't demand. Respect doesn't come from good intentions. It comes from how you position yourself in the world. And that's exactly why many live frustrated. They do everything for others, are polite, understanding, helpful, and still remain undervalued. Why? Because the world respects those who make themselves respected, not those who live to please. This kindness you were taught to practice can, without you realizing, become a burden. You feel guilty for saying no. You fear being seen as selfish. You avoid conflict at all costs. And little by little, you dim your light. You give in here, stay silent there. Erase yourself more tomorrow. Before you know it, you're living a life where everyone is a priority, except you. And the irony is that even doing all this, you don't get the affection or gratitude you expected. On the contrary, it is precisely your kindness that people begin to use against you. This is the point where virtue becomes a prison. Not because being good is wrong, but because you learn to confuse kindness with servitude. And when virtue isn't accompanied by awareness and firmness, it stops being virtue and becomes a form of self-sabotage. You become a hostage to your own image of being the nice person, and any attempt to assert yourself feels like a crime. This is one of the most dangerous forms of social manipulation. When people around you start to get uncomfortable, the moment you start respecting yourself, Machiavelli never said we should be cruel, but he was brutally honest in saying that, in many cases, excessive kindness is a luxury the real world doesn't allow. He understood that human beings are by nature self-interested and fickle, that most people act according to their advantage. So anyone who clings too tightly to the idea of being seen as good ends up putting themselves in a constant position of disadvantage. If you don't have the courage to stop being the nice one all the time, others will have the courage to take advantage of it. True freedom begins when you understand that you no longer need to uphold the image of the person who pleases everyone. That being good is not about constant self-sacrifice, but about being aware of your worth and your limits. That real virtue lies in acting with integrity, but also with intelligence. That saying no doesn't make you a bad person, but rather someone who respects themselves. And that, yes, to be respected in this world, you must stop being predictable, tame, always available. You must, as Machiavelli said, take responsibility for your own strength. Have you ever noticed that often? The kindest, most understanding and patient people are the ones who suffer the most disrespect, contempt, and emotional abuse. This happens because of a harsh psychological truth that almost no one dares to say out loud. The world doesn't value those who are always trying to please. Instead, it tends to see these people as weak, disposable, and predictable. Being too nice, or rather, being constantly submissive disguised as kindness, is often seen not as a sign of character, but of insecurity. Psychology calls this behavior the pleaser syndrome, or people-pleasing complex. People like this feel a deep fear of rejection and avoid conflict at all costs. They believe that if they are always good, generous, helpful, and gentle, they will finally be recognized and loved. But what they receive in return is often the opposite. They are ignored, overwhelmed, emotionally exploited, and treated like crutches. This happens because constant submission devalues your presence. You become predictable, disposable, functional, but not admired. Deep down, the overly nice person is trapped in a childish illusion, the idea that the world is fair, and that simply being a good person will bring good things in return. But Machiavelli already said, with brutal sincerity, that men are rarely good by nature, and that blindly trusting in others' goodness is putting yourself at risk. According to him, those who wish to remain free and respected must understand human nature as it is, not as they wish it were. Moral naivety, in this case, becomes practical weakness, and the price is high. Emotional submission often originates from trauma, authoritarian upbringing, abandonment, or humiliation in childhood. The person grows up learning that they will only be accepted if they are useful, quiet, and convenient. Thus, in adulthood, they develop an identity based on external approval. They live according to what others think, say, or need. But this compulsive kindness comes with an enormous psychological cost. Anxiety, constant guilt, emotional exhaustion, and a feeling of invisibility. And all of this feeds a cycle of self-erasure, where the person becomes incapable of existing for themselves. Machiavelli, with his political and realistic view, may seem cold at first glance, but he offers a powerful antidote to this emotional trap. He invites us to become strategists of our own dignity. In The Prince, he says that a ruler must not be naive, because others will not hesitate to take advantage of his weakness. This applies to everyday life. If you do not set boundaries, someone will cross them. If you do not value yourself, someone else will decide how much you're worth. Being good without firmness is not virtue. It is giving up on yourself. The cruelest part is that the world constantly tests how far you will go. People observe whether you tolerate disrespect, accept crumbs, forgive everything without discernment, and unfortunately, the more you allow, the less they respect you. Not necessarily because they are evil, but because human beings respond to signals. If you send signals of submission, you will be treated as inferior. If you send signals of emotional strength and clear boundaries, you will be treated with more consideration. This is basic social behavior, and Machiavelli understood it better than anyone. It is essential to understand that there is nothing wrong with being kind, empathetic, or generous. The problem arises when these traits are used as a mask to hide fear, insecurity, or an obsessive desire for approval. True strength lies in choosing to be good, not in being a hostage to goodness. Machiavelli would say that a prince must know how to appear virtuous, but also know how to act with firmness when necessary. Translated into personal life, yes, you can be polite, but you also need to be able to take a stand, confront, say no, and withstand rejection. Breaking free from the psychology of submission requires courage. It's necessary to recognize that being nice all the time may be a way of avoiding conflict, but it comes at a cost. You lose others' respect, and, even worse, you lose respect for yourself. Machiavelli shows us that true personal power is born from emotional autonomy, from the ability to live without depending on others' approval. When you learn to assert yourself clearly, to say no without guilt, to stop playing a supporting role in your own life, only then do you begin to build the respect you were always seeking from others. When we hear about the prince, many people imagine palace intrigues, political betrayals, and cold manipulation. But Machiavelli did not write only for the powerful. His work is a brutally honest manual on how to navigate a world where appearances matter more than intentions, where people judge before they understand, and where personal power depends less on morality and more on the ability to observe, act, and position oneself strategically. The prince, in fact, is each one of us, and his court is made up of colleagues, family, partners, social networks, and everyone around him. Machiavelli understood one essential thing: human beings react more to appearance than to essence. This may seem sad, but it is real. He writes, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." In other words, the way you present yourself, your image, your presence, your posture, has a direct impact on how others treat you. And most people build a passive, submissive image, always trying to please. But the modern prince must learn to control his own narrative. Creating a good image does not mean being fake. It means being aware of how you position yourself in the world. It is about developing presence, clarity, firmness. When you enter a room, the way you walk, speak, look, and behave sends subtle messages: confidence or insecurity, strength or submission. Machiavelli would say that the prince must appear virtuous, just, compassionate, firm, but must be able to act with harshness when necessary. In other words, appear to be good, but do not be a fool. Build your image with intention. Control how you are perceived, or you will be controlled by it. One of the pillars of personal power, according to Machiavelli, is the ability to adapt. The world changes, people change. Situations demand different responses. The effective prince is not the one who clings to a single idea of himself, but the one who reads the environment and responds intelligently. This applies to personal life as well. There are moments when you need to be firm, others when you need to be diplomatic. There are situations where silence is the best weapon, and others where confrontation is necessary. The secret lies in knowing what to do and when. This is true work. Machiavelli also warns of a fatal mistake: believing that good intentions are enough. He says that the prince who depends on luck or on the goodwill of others is doomed to ruin. This applies perfectly to everyday life. Depending on others' validation to feel good about yourself is the same as handing your power over to. Personal power is born when you take control of your story, your boundaries, your choices. When you stop waiting for permission and start acting with autonomy, you embody the spirit of the prince. Another crucial point is the use of strategy in human relationships. Machiavelli never said that you should manipulate everyone around you, but rather that you should know the game that is being played. This means paying attention to the power dynamics around you. Who dominates whom? Who stays silent? Who manipulates? Who is manipulated? Knowing this allows you not to be a pawn in someone else's game, but rather someone who makes conscious choices. The prince is not reactive. He observes, understands, and acts with intelligence. And that requires courage and self-knowledge. Perhaps Machiavelli's most powerful teaching is this: It is not about being loved or feared, but about being respected. He writes that the ideal is to be both, but if you must choose, it is better to be feared than loved. This does not mean spreading fear, but rather inspiring respect through clarity and strength. Be good, but not permissive. Be just, but not weak. Be understanding, but not manipulable. When you position yourself with firmness and maintain your integrity, you activate something deep in people, the sense that you cannot be ignored. Finally, the prince within you is the one who rules his own life with emotional intelligence and strategy. We are not talking about domination over others, but about leadership over yourself. This requires stopping living on autopilot, stopping the search for approval, and beginning to live with clarity of purpose, inner strength, and real autonomy. When you take on this posture, you cease to be a victim of circumstances and become the author of your own destiny. Machiavelli did not write for the weak. He wrote for those who have the courage to awaken. Comment below, I awaken the prince, if from today on you are going to leave weakness behind and begin to rule your own life. At some point in life, you will need to choose to live to please others or to live authentically. This choice seems simple, but it is one of the most difficult a human being can make, because wanting to be loved is natural. Since childhood, we learn that being good, obedient, pleasant, and docile makes us accepted. This becomes rooted in our behavior. But Machiavelli challenges us with an uncomfortable question. How far are you willing to bend just to be accepted? The price of social approval is often your own freedom. Machiavelli got straight to the point. It is safer to be feared than loved. Why? Because love in human relationships is unstable, fragile, and conditional. People love you as long as you meet their expectations, as long as you mold yourself into what they want. But fear, or rather, respect, is more enduring when built on a foundation of firmness, clarity, and self-sufficiency. The person who constantly seeks to please the world becomes a moldable puppet without identity. On the other hand, the one who stands firm, even when opposed, is remembered, respected, and often admired in silence. The great tragedy is that the search for approval functions like an invisible emotional prison. You start making choices based on what others will think, feel guilty when acting with firmness, and live dependent on others' acceptance. Little by little, you drift away from your own essence, becoming someone who plays a role, the role of the nice person, the easygoing person. But that's just a facade. Inside, a void grows, because no matter how well liked you are by everyone, you feel disconnected from yourself. Freedom, on the other hand, demands a price. Being free is saying no when everyone expects you to say yes. It means disappointing, frustrating, being criticized, misunderstood. Being free is understanding that you don't need to please everyone, and that being true to yourself is more important than being nice all the time. This is where many people freeze. They prefer to live in the comfort zone of superficial acceptance rather than face the momentary solitude of authenticity. But Machiavelli teaches that true power is not born from applause, but from inner independence. There is a modern illusion that it is possible to please everyone and still be free, but that is nothing more than a fantasy. The reality is that the more you try to please, the more you adapt to external expectations, and the less room is left for who you truly are. Free people make others uncomfortable. They don't live asking for permission. They don't follow social scripts. They don't stay silent in the face of the absurd. And for that very reason, they are respected. They leave a mark. And often, after being judged, they are envied by those who live trapped in the invisible chains of the need for approval. Machiavelli was not a defender of coldness or gratuitous cruelty. He was an observer of reality. He saw how those who seek only to be loved end up as hostages to the moods of the people. He understood that stability, both of a kingdom and of personal life, requires firmness of principles, courage to take a stand, and willingness to bear the consequences of being who you are. That is not being insensitive. That is having a backbone. It is about stopping living in fear of what others will think and starting to live with the courage to be who you truly are. The decision between being loved or being free is a daily one. It lies in the small gestures, when you remain silent to avoid displeasing, when you say yes, even wanting to say no, when you hide an opinion to avoid conflict. All of this seems harmless, but over time, it transforms you into a ghost of yourself. Machiavelli would say that in those moments, you are giving away your power, and the world notices. It notices when you live in fear, when you are at the mercy of others. And until you break this cycle, you will continue to be controlled by what you fear. Freedom requires courage. Courage to displease, to lose people, to face criticism, to be called selfish or arrogant, even when you are simply respecting yourself. Freedom is not comfortable, but it is powerful. It is what gives you back your self-esteem, your voice, your presence. It is what takes you out of the role of servant and places you at the center of your own life. And this is perhaps Machiavelli's greatest lesson. Do not live to be loved, live to be whole. And whoever is capable of loving you even then will love you truly. You have just spent the last few minutes hearing truths that perhaps no one has ever told you so frankly. And that is no coincidence. The world we live in profits from your obedience, from your emotional submission, from your desire to be liked at any cost. Being good, in the passive sense of the word, is a trap. You give up respect in exchange for empty smiles. You give up your personal power to feel accepted, and that comes at a very high cost. The loss of your identity, your voice, your freedom. But Machiavelli's philosophy is not an invitation to cynicism. It is a call to lucidity. He does not ask you to be cruel. He asks you to be strong. He does not teach how to manipulate. He teaches how not to be manipulated. Virtue, according to him, is the ability to face reality without illusions, with courage, strategy, and firmness. It is to stop being a pawn in someone else's game and take your place as the protagonist of your own story. That is what you need to do if you want to stop being used and start being respected. You do not need to stop being a good person, but you do need to stop being naively good. Being good is not saying yes all the time. Being good is not erasing yourself to keep the peace. Being good is not being fragile, nor available to everyone, nor confusing humility with servitude. Being truly good is knowing when to say no. It is setting boundaries. It is protecting your time, your energy, and your dignity. And that is only possible when you conquer the most valuable of all powers, the power of yourself over yourself. If you identified with what you heard up to this point, you may be beginning to awaken. And this awakening can be painful. You will realize that many people who cling to love you, in truth, only tolerated you while you were useful, submissive, and comfortable. When you start to change, the environment reacts. But remember, this is a sign that you are doing something right, because freedom always unsettles those who live in chains. So let this video not end as just another forgotten reflection. Let it be a turning point. From now on, observe. In which moments do you remain silent out of fear? When was the last time you put yourself first without feeling guilty? Or were you still trying to please just to avoid feeling rejected? And above all, what part of you needs to awaken to take the throne of your own life? Machiavelli wrote for princes, but the prince now is you. Your life is your kingdom, and you can continue trying to be nice, waiting for recognition, or you can start moving with strategy, dignity, and courage. The world does not respect those who only want to be loved. The world respects those who take a stand. If you are tired of being used and want to transform your self-esteem from the inside out, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell. Let's continue together on this journey of awakening and personal power with the eternal lessons of philosophy. Some think this was the end, but be careful. The war is not over yet. There are still things left unsaid. These two videos in front of you are not here by chance. One of them holds the key, the other, the poison. Only those who enter find out which is which. So, which one will you choose?